One late afternoon, as the sunset slowly dipped over the meadow, a little lamb was wandering alone among the endless green grass. It didn't understand why it was there, nor did it know how to find its way back. Everything around it felt unfamiliar. A silence blanketed the field. Only the gentle sound of wind brushing through the blades of grass and the soft rustling of distant movements could be heard. The little lamb looked around, its heart overwhelmed with a fear it couldn't explain. It missed the flock. It missed the gentle shepherd who always cared for it, called its name whenever it strayed. But now that voice was gone. The warmth of love and protection had faded. The world felt too vast, too quiet, and full of loneliness. The little lamb stood there, confused, unsure of what to do. And yet, something inside stirred, a deep longing to find its way back. Then, in that very moment, in the depth of its loneliness, the lamb heard a sound it recognized, one that made its heart leap: footsteps. The sound echoed like a promise, like comfort whispering that no matter how lost it had become, someone was still searching, still loving, and would never give up. Could the lamb find its shepherd again? And could the shepherd find the little lost lamb? This is where the story begins, with every step, every call, reminding us that no matter how far we wander, love and persistence can always bring us home. Part 1. A Peaceful Life Before the Lost Path. Every morning, as the first light of dawn bathed the green hills, the little lamb would wake up to the shepherd's gentle call. The sky would still be wrapped in mist, but the flock would already be stirring, dancing in the soft breeze that chased away the chill of night. Each morning felt like a fresh start, a new journey. But for the little lamb, each day passed in peace and safety. The lamb was part of the flock, living on a vast pasture where lush grass grew in abundance, where cool streams flowed gently, and where the hills rolled softly into the distance. It was a world of calm, no darkness, no danger, just love and protection from the shepherd. The little lamb always felt safe and cared for. Each step it took in life was filled with freedom and peace. Its shepherd was a kind man, always keeping watch over every single sheep. He often walked behind them, yet he was always ready whenever one needed help. To the little lamb, the shepherd was more than just a guardian. He was a trusted friend. He was always there when it felt lost, always calling its name, always shielding it from harm. The lamb could still remember the times it stood still, confused among the grasses, and the shepherd would gently approach, comfort it, and lead it back on track. Under the warm light of the sun, life felt beautiful to the lamb. On quiet afternoons, when the whole flock gathered together, the shepherd would sit upon a large rock and sing soft songs into the breeze. Those melodies became an irreplaceable part of the lamb's world, wrapping its heart in comfort and peace. The little lamb never imagined that this peaceful life could be disrupted. Day by day, it lived in safety, never once thinking that someday it might have to leave the flock, leave the shepherd, and face the wide world beyond. One afternoon, as the sun began to dip behind the distant mountain peaks, the little lamb followed the flock as usual toward a lush grassy field. The grass there was soft and fragrant, and gentle streams created music as they flowed. But something felt different that day. Though the shepherd's voice still called, a voice the lamb knew so well, it wasn't enough to hold the lamb back. Sometimes in life, We're drawn to the unknown, to things we've never seen or experienced. In a fleeting moment, the little lamb felt it could go further, could break away from the flock to explore new fields. It was a brief joy, a spark of curiosity in a young heart, unaware of the dangers that could be waiting. The little lamb began to walk a different path, one that led it farther and farther away, from the flock, from the shepherd. It didn't notice how quickly its world changed. The familiar trails faded. The trees it once knew became dark shadows. But even then, the lamb wasn't afraid. It felt like a part of something bigger, a world full of freedom and discovery. It lifted its head, breathed in the fresh air, and felt like it belonged to a vast painting with no boundaries. Yet, the lamb had no idea that in this wide world, challenges and dangers lurked unseen. Hidden shadows waited in silence. But for now, all the lamb could feel was the thrill of freedom and the allure of the unknown. It didn't know that no matter how beautiful life may seem, there are always hidden risks. And in that moment, as it strayed even farther, a vague sense of worry began to stir in its heart. Still, it couldn't stop, kept walking, kept chasing that newfound freedom, unaware that the road ahead would no longer be peaceful. Life, it seems, is never only made of calm, sunny days. It holds detours and trials we can't foresee. And the little lamb, with its innocent steps, had unknowingly wandered down a path from which it might not return. Part 2. The Lost Days, A Journey Through Darkness. Evening had come. Golden sunlight shimmered like it was melting over the leaves, and the little lamb, still full of the eager heart of an explorer, began to notice the silence around it. No more bleating from the flock, no more gentle babbling of the familiar stream, not even the shepherd's deep, warm voice singing on the breeze. Just itself and a world that felt far too vast, far too quiet. At first, the little lamb wasn't afraid. It told itself that all it needed to do was turn back, retrace its steps, and soon it would see the familiar shapes of the flock grazing in the afternoon light. But when it turned, it saw only a sparse forest, tangled paths, and thick brush that seemed to cover every possible way back. The sun sank lower. Shadows spread, creeping up the trunks and across the stones. And that's when the little lamb realized it was truly lost. For the first time in its life, its heart began to tremble. What had once been familiar was now just memory. Everything ahead looked strange and threatening. The sounds of the forest grew louder, scarier. The hoot of an owl, the whisper of wind through leaves, the snap of a dry branch beneath its feet. Each one made it flinch, called out. A weak bleat echoed through the vast forest. It hoped the shepherd would hear, hoped someone would answer, but only silence responded. A silence so deep it hurt. The little lamb started to walk in any direction, hoping to escape the crushing loneliness. But the woods thickened, the grass grew taller, the paths grew stranger, and the fear grew too. That first night passed in shivers. The little lamb curled up in a rocky hollow, trying to sleep through the cold wind and strange noises echoing all around. But its sleep was restless and haunted. It dreamed the shepherd was looking for it, calling its name through the dark, holding the familiar staff. It woke up with tears on its cheeks, realizing it had only been a dream. The next day, the little lamb kept walking. It didn't know where it was going, just that it couldn't stay still. It was hungry. The grass here was dry and rough, nothing like the sweet fields it had once known. The water was muddy, pooled in filthy puddles. It drank without tasting freshness, ate without feeling full. Everything seemed to resist it, as if the whole world whispered, "You're lost now." But what hurt most wasn't the hunger, or the cold, or even the fear of the dark. It was the emptiness inside, a wide, hollow ache that nothing could fill. It missed the flock, missed the shepherd, missed the way he would rest his hand on its head when it was afraid, missed the sound of him calling its name with the gentlest voice. And it began to understand freedom without love is just an illusion. Exploration without someone waiting is just aimless wandering. By the third day, its feet were scraped and sore. Its once white coat was smeared with mud and bits of dry grass. But strangely, it no longer cried. The fear had settled into a kind of silent surrender. It walked slower, called out less, and its eyes no longer sparkled like before, like a child who's been lost too long. The little lamb had begun to lose its innocence, its hope, and yet one thing remained, small, fragile, but still there, the belief that the shepherd would never abandon it, even though it could no longer hear his voice. Even as days passed without rescue, deep down the little lamb held onto the faint hope that he was out there searching, and that he would not stop until he found it. Then, one evening, as the lamb collapsed beside a broken fence, too weak to move, the sky opened with rain. The first drops of the season fell silently, soaking into its matted wool and chilling its thin skin. The little lamb could no longer rise. Its vision blurred, everything dimmed. But then, in the rain it heard something. Footsteps, not loud, not hurried, but steady. The sound of feet on stone, brushing against the wet earth. A staff tapping rhythmically on a narrow path. And then, a voice, so familiar it ached. "Where are you, little one? I'm coming." The little lamb lifted its head, forcing its eyes open. Its heart skipped a beat. It knew that voice. Even after all this time, it remembered. It was him, the shepherd, coming for it. In the rain, through the forest, in the dark, unrelenting. And in that moment, the little lamb let out a bleat, weak horse, but it rose through the rain like a fragile spark breaking through the night. And it didn't know, couldn't know, that this man, from long ago, had searched every hillside, crossed icy streams, and pushed through deep woods, not for a lamb, but for this one. The evening wind rustled the trees, carrying the scent of damp earth and lonely wildflowers. The little lamb lay still, soaked from the rain, exhausted from its wandering. But that sound, those familiar footsteps echoing through the silence, was like a tiny flame being rekindled in its chest. It tried to rise, but its legs would not obey. Each movement brought searing pain from foot to spine, from belly to throat, collapsed again. And then, from the blur of rain came a figure, tall, familiar, walking gently as if not to startle. "There you are." The shepherd's voice rang out, deep and full of emotion. "No rebuke, no anger, just a long, relieved sigh, like a weight lifting from his heart." Calloused hands bent low, lifting the little lamb with tender care. Not a word of complaint about the dirty wool, the wounds, the shaking body. He simply held it close, as if in this moment nothing else mattered. And in the softening rain, on a moss-covered trail, the little lamb rested in that warm embrace. Its tiny heart stirred with a truth it had never understood until now. Love is not just sweet when we're near. It is the relentless strength that searches, even when we are far. The night of return, the shepherd didn't rush. Every step was firm, patient. As if he knew, the lamb needed a slow journey to heal not just its body, but its heart. By nightfall, they reached the forest's edge, where a lantern hung from a branch. The one he had left there on the first night the lamb was lost. There was no anger.
No accusation.
Only welcome, only arms, and light. And in that light, the little lamb told its story with its eyes for the first time. The loneliness of wandering, the torment of hearing its own voice lost in the forest, and its greatest fear, that maybe no one was coming anymore. But the shepherd said nothing. He only placed his hand gently on its head and whispered, "I never stopped looking for you, not since the moment you strayed." The next morning, when the sun rose, the little lamb stood among the flock again. But it was no longer the same. Its gaze was deeper, the steps slower, and its heart, no longer burning with a hunger to explore the new, was full of gratitude for the familiar. Each time the shepherd called, it turned instantly, not out of fear but out of understanding, that in a vast world, there is one voice that is home, one love that never gives up, and one hand that will always come searching, even for just one lost lamb. Part 3. The Call and the Hand That Never Let Go. I used to think I was just one small sheep in the flock, nothing more special than the others. Day after day, I grew used to the shepherd's voice like I grew used to the green grass underfoot and the cool stream beneath the trees. That voice had always just been part of life. Not something I paid much attention to, not something that made me stop in my tracks. But it wasn't until I lost it, until that voice was no longer around me, that I realized it was the very thing keeping me whole in this vast world. A sound that could revive a heart after days of being lost, wounded, worn down, and nearly letting go of hope. It was the sound of familiar footsteps that awakened something in me. Something deep, faint yet fiercely alive. I couldn't see his face, but I heard that rhythm in his steps. Steady, calm, never rushing, yet never stopping. During my days in the forest, I had heard many sounds. The owl's cry at night, the wind howling through dry branches, the water flowing through rocky creeks. But none of them were like those footsteps. They didn't scare me. They made me cry, because for the first time I understood. Someone had never given up on me. The hand that touched my wound. I remember clearly when he came close. He didn't yell. He didn't scold. He didn't demand to know why I had strayed. He simply knelt down beside me. His eyes shone with a joy that words couldn't describe, as if I wasn't just part of the flock, but part of his heart. His hand reached my back, right where the long, bleeding scratch was. In that moment, I wanted to pull away out of shame. I was filthy, smelly, unrecognizable. But he wasn't afraid. On the contrary, his hand rested gently as if saying, "I know, and I still choose you." He lifted me onto his shoulders, not because I was worthy, but because he believed I was worth bringing home. The journey back is more than just a long walk. All the way back, I lay on his shoulders, listening to his heartbeat. It was the most beautiful song I had ever heard. Told me I still mattered, that even though I had lost my way, he had kept the way for me. I wasn't afraid of the deep forest anymore, because I was in the arms that would never let me go. Each step he took was an answer to every night I cried in the woods. I'm still here. I never stopped looking for you. After I returned to the flock, I was never the same. People might say I'm just one sheep among many, but I know I'm the one who was found, and that changed me forever. I no longer wander far from the shepherd's voice like I used to, not because I'm afraid, but because I remember. I remember the days I was lost, and the moment I was lifted from despair. Every morning, when I hear him call, my heart stirs, like an instrument struck at just the right note. I run toward that sound without hesitation, not out of duty but out of love. This time, I walk beside him. I don't dart ahead of the flock like I used to. I walk behind, beside him, where his hand sometimes reaches down and gently pats my head. Sometimes he sits to rest, and I lie beside him. No words needed, no gestures required, just the warmth is enough. I listen to his breathing. I watch how he cares for each sheep, and I realize he remembers every one of them, knows each bleat, each gait, even the wounds they haven't spoken of. I see that love, not just in how he found me, but in how he lives with the whole flock. I am no longer the lost, but the one who knows the way home. He didn't love me because I deserved it. He loved me because his very nature is love. And real love never gives up. I once feared no one would ever come looking for me, that I was just a forgotten name. But I was wrong. He never forgot, not once. And from that day on, every day I live is a quiet promise I whisper to myself. Even if I am the smallest sheep, the most foolish wanderer, I am still the one he came for. And that is enough to live my whole life, with a grateful heart and feet that always turn toward his call. Part 4. The Hill After the Storm. I thought that once the shepherd carried me back, everything would return to the way it was. I would lie once again with the flock on the green meadow, nibbling on the soft grass, hearing the babbling brook, and smelling the fresh breeze. I thought that returning meant the end of being lost, of fear, of strange dreams, and of feeling alone. But I was wrong. Returning is not like a door opening, leading you back into the old room where everything remains the same. It's not like that. It's like stepping into a house that once belonged to you, only to discover that your heart has changed. I had been far away, and now I had to relearn how to live, as though I had never left. I didn't tell anyone. No one asked. The other sheep were overjoyed at my return, nuzzling me, wagging their tails, and then resuming life as usual. To them, my being lost seemed like a passing breeze. It came and went. But to me it was a storm. I lay in the middle of the flock, surrounded by the familiar warmth, but I couldn't sleep. I heard the wind brushing over the grass, the crickets chirping in the rocks, the sound of water dripping somewhere from the distant stream, and in those sounds, memories resurfaced. The days I fought the cold nights alone, The moments I thought I had been forgotten forever. The times I longed for just one call, but only silence had answered. I couldn't forget it easily, and I couldn't forgive myself as easily as he had forgiven me. I still remembered I was the one who left the flock. I was the one who veered off into the dense woods. I was the one who believed I would be fine, even without him by my side. And when everything fell apart, all I could do was shiver and wait for something. Maybe a miracle. I didn't speak of it, but perhaps he knew, because he didn't leave me alone for too long. Every morning, when the sunlight was still gentle, he would take me aside, just me behind the hill, to a small meadow nestled beneath the shade of a tree, with a cool and peaceful stream. No words were spoken. He would sit and I would lie next to him, silent. But in that silence, I felt something being mended. I learned how to trust again. I learned how to eat without looking over my shoulder. I learned how to lie down and close my eyes without pulling back in fear. One time, I wandered a few steps away from the flock. Just a few steps, but enough for the old cold to return. I froze. I stood still. Then I heard his voice, gentle. "Where are you?" Just 3 words, but my heart softened. He still remembered me. He still cared. He still called. Not only when I was lost, but even when I was just uncertain. That was when I knew being found is not the end. It's the beginning of a new journey. A journey of being cared for, healed, and loved, even when I hadn't learned to love myself yet. One night, I asked him, in my heart, not aloud, "Why did you seek me?" And the answer didn't come in words. It came with a light touch on my back, with the sound of the wind whispering across the hill, and with his constant presence throughout the season when I was learning to live again. Then spring came. The little lambs were born. They scampered around me, calling me Big Brother, prancing as though I had never had a lost past. One day, one of them looked up and asked, "Were you lost? In the woods all the time?" I nodded. Then I told them,
No secrets.
I told them about the dark nights, the howling wind, the fear, but I also told them about him, about his bright eyes, his shoulders that carried me, and his voice calling me warmly like an embrace. I used to be ashamed. Now I am not, because I realized I was once lost, but he was never lost to me. And in all that I lost, the peace, the flock, the meadow, the stream, there was one thing I did not lose. The one who loved me enough to wander through the deep woods just to find me. The hill still has the wind blowing. The grass still sways. But my heart is no longer cold. I don't need to be perfect to be loved. I only need to be honest with my wounds, so that one day I will be a refuge for someone else who has wandered, just like I did. Part 5. When the shepherd needs rest, and my heart learns to lay down its worries. During the long afternoons, as the sun gradually sank behind the distant mountains, I began to realize that the shepherd was not always as strong as I had thought. Before, I had seen him as a solid wall, always standing firm, unmoving in the face of every storm. But now, I understood. Even he needed a quiet moment for himself. We often took walks through familiar paths, where the grass grew tall, and the wind caressed the branches of trees. But one afternoon, as the sunlight began to fade, he no longer led us to our usual place. He took us to a desolate plot of land, where a tall tree stood, its trunk gnarled, its leaves long gone, leaving only the dry branches. We sat down beneath its shade, and I felt something very different. He said nothing. He simply sat in silence, his eyes gazing into the distance, as though weary from all the searching. I looked at his face and saw the faint haze in his eyes from the many long days spent guiding the flock. He not only cared for us but also bore the anxieties of the entire flock, of the lost sheep, and sometimes of the quiet nights when no one was by his side. Perhaps no one knew that behind every decision to search, behind each step taken to find a lost sheep, he too had sleepless nights, moments of sadness and solitude. We often only saw a shepherd who was steadfast and tireless. But in reality, each time he found a lost sheep, it was a battle not just with danger, but with the shadows in his own soul. I couldn't help but wonder, how could he never grow tired, never lose heart? How could he be so patient, so enduring? Then, one afternoon when we stopped under the tree, I saw the first sign of weariness in his eyes. It seemed that he, too, needed a little time to rest. And I, the little sheep, realized that sometimes it was my turn to help him rest, to show him that, in the heart of his flock, there was a place just for his peace. I gently approached him. I sat beside him. We both remained silent, letting the stillness fill the air. Only the soft wind blowing over the golden grass fields and the chirping of small birds could be heard in the quiet space. I realized that we didn't need to say anything. We just needed to be near each other, to share this moment of rest, a moment where no questions or answers were needed. So I lay down near him, feeling his warmth radiate onto me. I understood that sometimes, just being present was all a sheep could offer to the shepherd. Not every moment required rescue. Not every moment required encouragement. Sometimes, all the shepherd needed was a shoulder to lean on, a heart that could remain silent and listen. "I will always be here," I whispered, though I wasn't sure if he could hear. But I felt his peace in his heart. It was as if he understood, and then he smiled, gently stroking my head. It was a moment of deep understanding, a moment where I realized that love is not just about grand gestures or flowery words. Sometimes, it's simply silent presence, a sharing that doesn't need to be expressed in words. As the sun finally set and the sky darkened, I saw him rise, stretching his limbs. Though he didn't say anything, I knew he was ready to continue. And I, though not having said everything I felt, was also ready to follow. The shepherd had rested, but only for a short while, a light sleep under the starry night sky. And then, when the dawn returned, he resumed his work, seeking the lost sheep, caring for those who needed him and bringing them back to the flock. But now, I knew that, no matter how tired his feet might be, his heart would always remain steadfast, always having enough strength to lead us. We continued walking in peace, each step of the shepherd a reminder of boundless love, and each of us, no matter how small, an irreplaceable part of this journey. Part 6. The familiar footsteps, the sound of compassionate understanding. Each day we continued our long journey, but there was one thing I realized: no matter where we were, no matter how long or short the road, I always felt an extraordinary peace. It was not the peace of a quiet or calm place, but the peace that came from within, from the love that the shepherd had for us. I never felt truly alone, even when I was lost or walking on unfamiliar paths. We continued walking under the soft light of the morning, the sound of the shepherd's footsteps blending with the sound of the sheep's steps. But one morning, as the first rays of sunlight began to shine, something special happened. As the flock grazed peacefully on the hillside, I, as usual, found a quiet spot to sit and reflect. I gazed into the distance, where the shepherd was watching over us, keeping a close eye on all of us. Suddenly, I heard a faint sound, a very familiar noise. It wasn't the sound of dry grass underfoot, or the birds singing, but the sound of footsteps, strong and steady steps. A warm feeling enveloped me, and I hurriedly looked up, and there he was. Those footsteps did not belong to any of the sheep, but to the shepherd himself, as he turned and began walking towards me. Each step he took was like a heartbeat of mine, each step, each pace, reminding me that I was never lost in his unconditional love. As he drew near, his gaze was not only filled with love, but also with something that reminded me of patience on this journey. Though sometimes we walked too quickly, or at times felt weary, he was always beside us, never abandoning a single sheep, even when we lost our way, even when we couldn't see him. "Are you tired?" he asked, his voice gentle yet full of concern. I looked up at him, seeing the understanding in his eyes. "I'm not tired, but I feel like we've come a long way. Are you tired?" He smiled, and I could see a trace of weariness in his eyes, but he did not show it. "No, my love, just know that you can always find your way back. You will never be lost." His words were a deep encouragement, and in that moment, I understood that even though there were times when we felt weary, not knowing where to go, as long as we trusted in him, every road would always lead us to peace. We continued walking, but this time, my steps felt more sure. I no longer felt uneasy when I looked ahead because I knew that no matter how far the road was, he was always there, guiding and protecting me. Then, one afternoon, when the sky shifted from bright blue to shades of orange and gold, I began to hear a soft call. I turned around and saw him standing behind, walking toward me. This time, I could distinctly sense the weariness in his eyes, but his determined steps remained unchanged. "Do you remember this road?" he asked, and I was surprised to realize that we had returned to an old path, a path we had walked a long time ago, back in the early days of our journey. I nodded, feeling as if the memories of those early days had come alive in me. The days when I was just a little sheep, wandering cluelessly behind his footsteps, not yet understanding all that he had done to protect and care for me. "This is where you got lost, isn't it?" he asked, his voice calm. I nodded, remembering the moment when I had wandered away from the flock, running without looking back, until I became lost in a dense forest. Then, the familiar sound of his footsteps had echoed, bringing me back to the flock. I realized then that I was being guided, protected, and feeling his love in each of his steps. "Do you remember?" he asked again, and this time, I not only remembered my lost steps but also realized that I was not the only one who had been lost. Throughout this long journey, he too had experienced moments of weariness, sometimes feeling lost, but always finding his way back. We stood there for a long time, beneath the shade of a large tree, looking at the paths we had walked, then looking ahead, where the sheep grazed peacefully, as if there were no hurry at all. "Can we rest for a while, shepherd?" I asked. He smiled and nodded. "Yes, my love, we can rest for a bit. No matter what, we all need these moments of peace to feel the love, care, and to know that there is always a place for us to return to." And so, under the late afternoon sky, we sat down, without needing to say anything more, only the gentle rustling of the grass, and the small sounds from the flock, and we felt the quiet filled with love. We knew that no matter what happened, the shepherd would always guide and care for us, and that his love would always help us find our way, even when the path was unclear and unfamiliar. Part conclusion: going home, returning to the beginning. Finally, one day, as the light of the sunset began to fade, when the air grew cooler and peaceful, I felt that I was nearing the end of this long journey. The shepherd and I, we had walked so many roads, faced many challenges, and there was nothing more precious than feeling his presence, even in times when I felt lost or weary. But today, a strange feeling filled me. I no longer felt anxious or uneasy. There was no hurry, no urgency. We had traveled far and had come back to where we started. That was the place where the sheep were grazing by the stream, where the shepherd always looked at us with eyes full of love. We stood there, facing each other in the quiet space. The shepherd's steps had led us back home. A warm and gentle feeling spread within me. I looked into his eyes and felt something very clear. I was no longer the lost sheep. I had come home. "You've gone far, but in the end you've come back," he said gently, with understanding in his voice. "You never need to fear being lost, because I am always here, waiting for you to return." I couldn't fully express the emotions in my heart at that moment. It was peace, deep happiness, and the understanding that even though there were times I felt lost and sometimes felt weary, his love never changed. It was always a firm foundation, a light in the darkness, a source of strength to keep going. He bent down and gently comforted me, as if greeting me, as if offering encouragement. "No matter where you go, no matter what you do, I am always here. Every sheep in the flock is important to me. Each one is loved." At that moment, I realized something very clearly. It was not that we found our way home, but that the shepherd had found us. Throughout the journey, it was not only I who had learned, but I realized that he too had been smiling as he watched each step I took, each time I returned to his love. The flock gathered around me, and we blended together like a family, inseparable. Those little footsteps were no longer alone, but had a hand always ready to lift, guide, and lead. The shepherd was not only the one who guided us along the long road, but also the light, the comfort when we felt lost. And as the last light of the day faded, I knew that no matter if the journey ended or not, I would never walk alone again. For I had learned that in every step, in every challenge, we always had him beside us, loving and protecting us. The feeling of a small sheep saved, returned home was incomparable. No matter how long or difficult the journey, the important thing was that we always knew we were not alone. And in every moment, the shepherd would always be the final destination. The end. The story of the lost sheep ended with a return, but it also marked a new beginning, a journey that would never end. The journey of love, care, and guidance from the shepherd, who is always ready to seek, love, and lead each of us back home.